He could win a second Premier League this year. I wouldn't be stunned if that happens. I think like at one point, like Sir Alex, he was at United for so long that like literally he was God there, and quite rightly. Like he is obviously incredible. But I just think like the versatility Klopp has shown going to multiple different leagues and performing. I think
Rory is going to explode. Everything that you said about Klopp and Mainz, surely that's applicable to Sir Alex Ferguson, Aberdeen.
Wow. If you hit the like button, make sure you're subscribing. No, I know not all of you are big Sir Alex Ferguson fans because of what he did to you in your childhood, what he did to a lot of you in your adulthood. Everything he did throughout his career, unless you were a fan of Aberdeen or a fan of Manchester United, he hurt you. Looking at these lists, I personally still have him above Pep Guardiola, but people putting a Guardiola above him, I don't think it's offensive. I don't think it's rude. Putting Klopp above Sir Alex, in fact, putting any other manager that's managed in the Premier League, potentially barring Pep, although I would, but there's so much merit in Pep being above him. I understand it. I don't agree, but I understand. Doing it with Klopp is an absolute insult to football, and this shit has got to stop. The way we water down history, rewrite it, and disrespect the brilliance that was Sir Alex Ferguson, not only an amazing coach, but an absolutely amazing manager that run football clubs as well, a different skill set that doesn't even exist in 2024 because everyone has a sporting director, a footballing director, a technical director, a CEO, and then they coach the team. Fergie did the whole goddamn lot for a large proportion of his career. I want to take a little bit more of a listen to this, but hit the like and the share button for me. Go and check out my new channel, The Squad, as well. But Klopp above Sir Alex after one Premier. I know they're including their whole careers. Let's listen.
Destabilising the old firm, winning European silverware. Yeah. Surely that's more impressive than winning the league.
Do you know what's really crazy? First of all, Sir Alex did do that. He went when Scottish football was still powerful, potent, dangerous. He went and won a European trophy with them and a big one at the time in the Cup Winners' Cup. And he destabilized. He broke the stranglehold and the power of the two clubs from Glasgow, Rangers and Celtic. Not done for many years prior. Hasn't been done since 4 decades later. To ignore that is an abomination to football.
That is atrocious, the Klopp shout.
The mind shot's bad, man.
Hang on. Aberdeen.
You're the only one with Sir Alex first, by the way. Everyone else was Pep.
Everybody else is wrong.
Everybody
else is crazy. Everybody else is wrong.
Everybody else is wrong, in my opinion. But I think that there's a closeness there. Sir Alex still has a lot more trophies in his career. And Fergie still has something that I personally hold above Pep. He took over 2 teams that weren't the best in the world, that were fallen from grace or had never been there, and he built them into the best in the world. I'm not taking anything away from Pep. I just hold that in a high regard. But Pep is amazing. Him being top doesn't trigger me, actually. I don't agree with it, but I'm not triggered by it.
It's not close.
It's very close.
It's not close.
It is.
I think it's close.
He's had arguably the 2 best sides of all time under his wing. Like,
Well, Guardiola beat Ferguson twice.
in the city.
Fergie, he did, but that was when Fergie was almost retiring. You know, in my personal opinion, if they would have met 20 years earlier, it would be a very different conversation. But it's hard to... Sometimes you see that with boxers. A boxer's almost at the end of his career and an up-and-coming champion beats him. But how would they have fared when they're both at their peak? It's a very hard thing to do. But let's move on from that and get back to the Klopp thing, because this is where the disrespect is going to get real.
I still think that Klopp is operating... Yeah, I think Klopp is operating in a more professional era, like a higher standard of football.
A higher standard of football and a more professional era now. That's the claim.
Yeah. Like the era that Klopp is operating in is far greater. Like the sports science, everything that goes into it.
But the sports science benefits
the tactics that Klopp is having to come up against week in, week out, I still think that's greater than what Sir Alex had to come up against.
Okay. Let's just stop him there. Let's break this down to reality. I don't know who this guy supports. I'm going to assume he's a Liverpool fan. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming he's a Liverpool fan. But indirectly here, he has just gone and tarnished, brutalized, bastardized Liverpool's complete legacy as a football club, plus what he's done to other teams. So when he says sports science, etc., sports science only exists because of changes that the likes of Wenger and Fergie brought into football throughout the 80s and the 90s, which was getting rid of alcohol, getting rid of bad foods being eaten. It's an evolution. And you can't hold that against anybody. You can't turn around and go, yeah, but how would Pep and Klopp cope with a team full of drunk players? Because they're not managing teams full of lots of drunk players like the elder statesman did. But it's about comparing achievements within those eras, because in those eras, every club faced the same issues. So now, yes, there's sports science, but every club has sports science. So yes, it's harder it's easier for teams to compensate against you. But if you have the better players, the difference is still the same. It's like saying, well, Fergie is better than the manager that came before him because they're not drinking alcohol now and it's a more professional era. No, you compare trophies, surely. And secondly, Sir Alex Ferguson, when he was a manager of Aberdeen and Manchester United, do you know who he was competing against? If you were to sit there now and name the top 20 managers of all time, how many have been managing in the last 6 years? Guardiola's in there. Ancelotti's in there. But how many managers in the last 6 to 7 years of management, 8 years, 9 years of management would get into that top 20 list? To name a few that Fergie came up against and was around: Brian Clough, Marcelo Lippi, Ancelotti, of course, in his absolute pomp, Bob Paisley, Jose Mourinho, Johan Cruyff, Giovanni Trapattoni, Zeki. So many legendary managers. If you look at any poll, any list, any article that lists the greatest managers of all time, Fergie competed against an absolute plethora of managers whose legacy in the game puts them in the top 5, top 10, top 20 managers of all time. Klopp's been up against Guardiola, yes. And he's had, of course, Ancelotti still around. I know Simeone's a brilliant manager, but no one has him in the top 10 of all time, top 20 of all time. Fergie was up against the majority of them. So to argue that it was an easier era in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s because of sports science and the way tactics are now is such a ridiculous point. If, though, we're going to accept it, he has just done Liverpool's entire history. If we're saying that a manager's achievements throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties don't compare to today, what does that make of all the Champions League and Premier League trophies or league title trophies that Liverpool won in the 70s and the 80s? That also must mean they're even less valuable now than they were then. So that means a team can win 2 Champions Leagues now in the sports science era, and they must weigh more than the 4 or 5 Liverpool won prior to sports science, prior to this tactical era, prior to this era with better managers and better teams, surely. Which means you're wiping Liverpool's history away. In fact, you're wiping lots of Madrid history away. You're wiping a lot of Bayern Munich history away. You're wiping away Villa history, Forest history. You're literally wiping England's World Cup means nothing because it was done in the 60s. Maradona and Pele's brilliance is irrelevant because it was done before sports science. Think about the logic here. Absolutely horrendous in every single way, shape, and form.
Oh, you've got more staff, you've got more technology.
The on his ass. The steeriness to a bygone
league titles.
He won 13 league titles and he destabilised the old firm. The old firm have a duopoly on that title.
One in Europe with Aberdeen.
And Ferguson had to do this over 3 generations.
I also think like Klopp literally invented a style of football, like the whole gegenpress.
He didn't invent the style of football. He didn't invent it. I'm sorry, this man should be banned from speaking football. Jurgen Klopp didn't invent it in any, and also pressing isn't a new thing. Go back and watch Man United in the 90s. We press people. I can't believe youngsters believe this nonsense. And let me make this point. If every few years, because sports science is better, tactics are better, our understanding of the game is better, the achievements outweigh our predecessors. If Arteta wins the league this year, beating this Pep team and beating this Klopp team that you're essentially saying are the greatest ever, how good does that make Arteta? Where did this Arsenal team rank in the history of football if they beat those 2 teams to a league title? You are setting a precedent that every time a new team wins the league, that manager in that team has a shout of being looked at as the greatest. It's madness. It's the madness. No Liverpool fan, you may agree Klopp's better, but no one is agreeing with this logic. It is crazy. It erodes the history of our beautiful, fantastic game, and it disrespects the eras. Of course, if you put a team from 2024 in a time machine, so if you took a team from 1985 and flew them to today's game, made them play against a team now with the way the balls are, the technology is, and the fitness, they would probably lose because they physically wouldn't be able to handle it. But equally, if you threw the boys now back onto those lumpy pitches with big boots, really heavy balls, where those tackles were allowed, they may struggle in that circumstance. At the same time, if you took those men from the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, and you gave them the upbringing that these footballers have, the foods, the diets, the sports science, how much better would those players have been? How much better could they have been with that knowledge? And equally, what you're discounting is that every generation in every industry gets to do this. You piggyback upon the greatness of what came before you. The reason that you can have the sports science, the reason that you can have the tactics of today is because of your predecessors. It's because of what was built prior to you. And the people that built that you're now catapulting from, you're being elevated from, we're now going to shit on and say that it doesn't matter. Guardiola is that guy's best in his opinion. And if he's saying that about Klopp, what's he saying about Guardiola? Guardiola only has the style of football he has because of Johan Cruyff, a manager, by the way, that was managing in the same era as Fergie that he has just turned around and said was a rubbish era. I'm sorry to get irate, but I love football to my core, but we should not be disrespecting the history of it. This shit has got to stop. Putting down Fergie, putting Klopp above him to win a little battle now. You're literally eradicating Liverpool's own history. Every single Liverpool fan worth his salt is going to reject this. I am rejecting it. This content needs deleting. Big up some of the boys in it. I know them. Good lads. But this was horrendous in every single way, shape, and form. Bye-bye.